The Deportment Disappearance by Gabriella Bing. Prologue. The kidnapper strode through the shadows of the alleyway as he approached his destination, number 32, Bow Street, Covent Gardens. Mist clogged the air. He had to get this right. If he did not, his life would be over. Slowly, he pulled a knife from his pocket and walked towards the door and knocked. Chapter 1. Laetitia Bordeaux gazed out of her window onto the streets of Paris. On the horizon, the sun set peacefully as night came. Suddenly, the peace was disrupted by Maximilian Deguerre storming in, throwing herself onto the floor as she tripped on her shoelaces. "I'm good, don't worry," she said from the floor. In her hand was the daily paper, the headline printed in bold. The Paris paper. Charles Bordeaux kidnapped. Yesterday, in the early hours of the morning, Charles Bordeaux was discovered missing from his home in Bow Street, London. He was meant to be leaving for Paris for the Exposition Universelle the next week. The police have started a search party. "What's up?" asked Max. Letty's face was as pale as paper. "That's my father, Charles Bordeaux. He lives in Bow Street, so it has to be him." She sat on her bed, hands trembling as if they could not stop. "Well, don't worry, Letty," said Max, her mouth full with Eclair and Fraser. "The police will find him. Anyway, what we need to think about is how we are going to get out of Deportment." "The police are no use, Max. I have to find him myself. I know where he will be because it happened to my uncle 20 years ago. Ring, ring, ring. Deportment. "Max, why are you climbing out of the window?" "Come on, Max, it's not that bad." "It is. You have a flat head, no offence, and I have a circular head, which makes it impossible for me to balance books on my head." She swung her legs over the table and knocked over a vase containing flowers. "Max," Letty groaned, "we have to clear up now." Letty ran out of the room before any more damage could be done. Chapter 2. The First Escape. That night, Letty lay in bed, waiting for the sounds of Max snoring. After what felt like forever, the aggressive snoring filled the air of their bedroom. Letty sat up. It was time. She crept slowly off her bed onto the wooden floor, her auburn hair giving her neck warmth. She walked slowly, steadily, over to her cabinet containing her clothes. Suddenly, a creaky floorboard decided to groan with annoyance that it was being trod on. Toe, heel, all the way to the other side of the room. She sighed with relief. Max had not woken up. She was going to make it. She pulled on a new pair of red trousers, a white blouse, and a cap to disguise herself. Just as she was walking over to the door, a voice sounded from the shadows. "Hello?" Chapter 3. The Second Escape. Max stood next to her bed, a pillow in her hand as a weapon, but not a very useful one. "What are you doing?" she asked, her blonde bob stuck to her cheek. "Going for a walk," she said, guilt spreading over her face. She had never been a good liar. "You're finding your dad, aren't you?" "Of course not," Letty replied, her voice high and squeaky. "I'm coming with you. You need someone who is intelligent at disguise." Max pulled a sheet off her bed and threw it over her head. Letty shook her head and sighed. "Well, come on then. Get dressed and let's go." 10 minutes later, Letty and Max were out in the corridor of the finishing school. The exit was only meters away. "Let's go now," Max said, pointing towards the door. They ran towards the door, pushed it open, and out into the streets of Paris. Chapter 4. Max and Letty paused, out of breath in the doorway of a train station. The melody of a harmonica floated through the streets, its music inspiring anyone who heard it. Couples walked hand in hand down the streets, the structure of the architectural masterpiece, the Eiffel Tower, behind them. "I've got it!" cried Max, leaping into the air. "We will take a train to Calais, a boat to England, and then we can find your father." "Yes, let's go! Stroke of genius, Max." Letty jumped off her bench, and the two girls ran through the station, their feet pounding on the elegant black and white tiles. They were going to find Letty's father. But it would be much harder than they thought. Chapter 5. Smoke filled the station as a train pulled into the station. The girls jumped aboard, excited that they were on their way to adventure. They pulled open the door of a carriage and stepped into a compartment. They sat down and stared out of the window. The train suddenly lurched forward and set off into the countryside. They'd been travelling for a while when a boy entered into the carriage. A parrot perched on his shoulder. His hair was a bright blonde, his eyes a blue that could be the sea. "Hello, don't mind if I sit in here, do you?" "Of course not," said Letty politely. Max glared at Letty. She was clearly not happy. "I'm Trevor, by the way. Who are you?" he asked, in terrible French, as he was obviously English. "Letty and Max. Where in England are you from?" "How did you know?" he cried. "Isn't it obvious? Your French is worse than a cat's," Max said dryly, slumped on a seat, munching on an apple. "Max," groaned Letty, blushing bright red. "What? I'm very truthful. Mother always said to always say the truth." "It's fine, don't worry," said Trevor. All was quiet in the compartment. Letty and Max closed their eyes and drifted into a deep sleep. Trevor smiled to himself sinisterly. He had found what he'd been looking for. Chapter 6. 10 hours later. Letty and Max stood on a jetty, shivering in the cold sea air of England. Trevor, however, was completely unharmed by the freezing weather. "Ah, lovely sunshine. We're having a heat wave today, and for the rest of this week, a high of 0 degrees and a low of -10. I might change into a bathing suit before we get to London." "What? Are you feeling all right? It's so cold I'm beginning to wonder whether I need a doctor for frostbite," cried Max, her speech not very clear as her teeth were chattering, as if they were a clock wound up too fast. "I'm deeply sorry to disappoint you, Trevor, but our train to London is in 5 hours, so there may not be time to go for a dip," said Letty. Trevor looked very disappointed from this remark. He must really like swimming in the sea. "Okay, let's go to the train station and wait for our train." He walked sulkily towards the street, his bottom lip sticking out like a toddler who did not get an ice cream. The Dover train station was a marvel to the eye. A large domed glass ceiling shone light into the station, and a young woman selling cheeses and bread, which were producing a foul smell, stood in the hallway. "Come and get your bread and cheese here." "Only 1 year old." "Let's go and wait on a bench. I'm starving, but I do not trust that bread and cheese," said Letty. Max, however, did go and buy some cheese. She came back to the bench with her mouth stuffed with mature cheddar, which had gone blue in the centre and green on the edges. 4 hours later. "All passengers boarding train 139 to London. The train is beginning to prepare to leave the station," yelled a man in the centre of the hallway. For the past 3 hours, Max had been vomiting uncontrollably from the cheddar. "That's our train! Finally, we can go! Come on, Max, we cannot miss our train." The trio ran towards the platform and hopped onto the train just as it had started to exit. In the doorway of the train, a well-dressed man stood, his hair slicked back with brilliantine. Trevor went pale at the sight of him. He had dark, fair hair and murky green eyes with a curved nose. "How do you do?" he asked Letty, holding out a hand. Max was clearly irritated by the attention Letty was getting. "Very well, thank you." Letty's face was a mix between confusion and a pleasure of annoying Max. She scowled even harder. He nodded at Trevor and then left them, walking down the corridor before slipping into a compartment. "Come on, we all need to go, find a compartment before they're all gone," said Trevor, walking the opposite way of the mysterious man and into another compartment. The girls followed. Letty caught a glimpse of Trevor's face as he smiled a horrible smile. Chapter 7. London. The train pulled into Paddington Station just as Max had started vomiting again. Bile hurled across the compartment, and people ran for shelter. As Letty, Max and Trevor stepped onto the platform, they were met with stares from aristocrats and a cacophony of noise. Trevor's jacket was covered with the reappearance of the cheddar cheese, as well as Letty's trousers and jersey. "Trevor, we never asked you what you were doing in France. What were you doing there?" Max asked suspiciously. I was seeing my grandmother." "Lovely. Where does your grandmother live in France, Trevor? Letty, when we get back there, we really should go and visit her." "She lives in Rue d'Espoir, Vienna." "Aha! I knew it. You are lying, and are in a team with the posh guy from the train, and are leading Letty away from her father." Trevor was gobsmacked. It really was rather an accusation. His face resembled the face of a goldfish, his mouth opening and shutting in shock. "Max, seriously, just because you were jealous that you did not get asked how do you do, does not mean that you make accusations. Trevor, I'm so sorry, but she is right. Your geography is appalling." "I'm not saying that his geography is bad. I'm saying that he is a—" Max could not finish her sentence, as Trevor's face suddenly changed from happy to dangerously evil. "How did you find out? You have ruined everything. It's called a newspaper description, fake sleeping, and very good acting and observatory skills, if I do say so myself." Now it was Letty's turn to be gobsmacked. "Hang on a minute. Max is right for once? Seriously? And Trevor, come to think of it, the newspaper description looks a lot like you. So you kidnapped my father?" "No. Maybe. Yes, I did. With help, of course, but yes, I did. And watch out, Letitia Bordeaux. We are coming for you next." And with that, Trevor left the two girls in the street. "What do we do now, Max? I mean, we could try and find my father, because I have a feeling I know where he could be." "Let's do that then. Where do you think he is?" "I think he is in the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral, like my uncle was." Chapter 8. St. Paul's. The cathedral was one of the most beautiful sights that Letty and Max had ever seen. Its dome reached into the sky gracefully. But sadly, rescue missions do not involve sitting around and marvelling at architecture. They ran into the cathedral. The inside was even grander. Pillars reached high into the sky, and black and white marbled floor laid the ground. Their footsteps echoed around them as they searched, which was harder than it sounds in a cathedral. Suddenly, Letty cried out, "I found the entrance to the crypt!" The girls ran down the narrow stairs. After what felt like forever, they reached the bottom. No one was there, but On the floor lay his reading glasses. Epilogue. Trevor walked towards the hotel, excitement running through his veins. He had found what he'd been looking for. To be continued.